Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Business Incorporated, coming to you live from Lagos. I'm Chimezie Obi Iwawu. South Africa's rand weakens against the US dollar, weighed down by a firm dollar and continued concerns that the finance minister could be facing imminent arrest. Egypt's parliament approves a value-added tax of 13%. Plus, Tunisia's state-owned carrier Tunis Air to lay off 1,000 employees as part of reform plans. Well, we'll begin with the global markets, and starting off in Asia, markets there finished higher today, while Japanese shares edged down in a muted reaction to better than expected economic data. The benchmark Nikkei 225 closed nearly flat, down 0.07%, while the Topix edged down 0.03%. Both indices wavered modestly between positive and negatively throughout the session. And the rest of the Asian markets mostly rose, with South Korea's Kospi closing up 0.36%. In Australia, the ASX 200 added 9.08 points, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index was up 1.04% in late afternoon trade. Chinese mainland shares closed modestly higher, with the Shanghai Composite up 6.16 points, while the Shenzhen Composite finished nearly flat at 2,028.35. And for markets in Europe, let's cross over now to Frankfurt for updates on development there. Annette Wisbert, DWTV Channel TV financial correspondent, is standing by there to talk to us. Good afternoon, Annette. Good to have you back on the program. Now, it's countdown to the end of August. How's the market doing today, especially as the U.S. non-farm payroll data is expected on Friday?
Well, actually, the markets are very friendly today here in Europe. It seems as if people like to concentrate also on the positive side of things, that even if economic data from the United States comes in better than expected, that also means that the United States, or the U.S. economy, which is still the biggest economy of the world, is doing well, which is, of course, also positive news for companies in Europe, talking about export possibilities. So I think markets have turned their attention to the other side of the medal, not only to the interest rate side of things, where they were concentrating on yesterday and on Friday. They were a little bit spooked by comments coming out from Federal Reserve officials. Today, the mood is very bright.
Right. Now, the European Commission has just ruled that Apple should repay Ireland 13 billion euros. That's a huge amount of money there. How much impact do you see this having on the company, and do you think this might affect the relationship between the EU and the US? There's been so much controversy about the tax probe being done by the EU, and the US has actually been criticizing that.
We had comments out from the United States quite directly after the ruling from the European Commission. And of course, the United States Treasury is not very much amused about the unilateral move from the European Commission, they call it. Apple was directly warning that this move could have direct consequences on investments in Europe, above all, of course, on Ireland. And Ireland itself is also saying they want to appeal to the European Court against the ruling of the European Commission. So essentially nobody is happy with that ruling, apart from the European Commission, who is saying that they want to assure to have a level playing field when it comes to paying taxes. They want to close tax evasion loopholes, and they want to move bold, because, you know, I mean, years and years, I think everybody was saying that the European Commission is a teethless tiger when it comes to sanctions and to avoid companies using those tax loopholes. And now the new commissioner, who is Frau Vestager from Norway, she's very tough on implementing those or closing any loopholes which were existing.
Now, another controversial issue between the U.S. and the EU is the issue of the trade, free trade there. Talks over the controversial transatlantic trade and investment partnership, that seemed to be in danger now as France is now pushing for an end to negotiations. Is this a concern for the market and investors out there?
I think it's not yet the end of the story, and people are also not believing that's the end of the story yet, because, you have like opposition politicians in Germany, not opposition politicians, but you have politicians in Germany calling for an end of the negotiations. We have them in France. Both countries are heading into general elections next year, and the TTIP content is not very popular. So what has taken place here is more or less that the TTIP content was taken hostage by already election campaign issues. At the end of the day, it's not up to national politicians to call an end to those negotiations. It's the European Commission who is leading the negotiations on behalf of the nation states, and the European Commission is still saying those negotiations are ongoing, even though, of course, they're tricky. Negotiations are having the nature of mostly tackling the crucial issues at the end of the negotiations, and we are heading into a phase which is getting, of course, more intense between the United States and Europe. But to be fair, also on the other side, the TTIP negotiations are not easy between both parties, and there hasn't been any agreement yet in any of the chapters. So it's still very much up in the air whether we'll get an agreement anywhere in the near-term future.
Right, thank you very much for your time, Annette. We hope to see the end of that talk shortly, very shortly. Thank you for your time, Annette. And while the U.S. market gets set to open for trading today, stocks opened higher on Monday as investors shift their focus to the key employment report. Will the data make the case for an interest rate hike at the Federal Reserve's meeting on September 21? Jill Malandrino, VOA Channels TV business correspondent, reports from New York City.
Good evening from the NASDAQ market site. I'm Jill Malandrino. Wall Street opened up just a touch on Monday morning as investors try to gauge the timing of the next interest rate hike following comments from top Federal Reserve officials last week. The dollar was trading higher while crude oil was down just about 1% amid doubts producers will agree on a deal to stabilize the market when suppliers meet next month for informal talks. Recall the April meeting ended with a stalemate, so expectations aren't too high for the meeting coming up over the next couple of weeks. Following a week of relatively quiet trade, stocks saw some volatility on Friday. The catalyst, of course, was the move by comments from Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen, a decidedly more hawkish tone among the Fed members. The formal topic of her remarks in Jackson Hole, the Federal Reserve's monetary policy toolkit, implied a technical focus on the challenges facing the central bank in an era of tepid growth and low inflation. But then the Fed chief hinted at a bump in interest rates, noting a case for an increase in Fed funds has strengthened in recent months given a solid labor market performance and outlook for the economy and inflation. But she gave no specific mention of timing for the next move. Now, there's just 3 more FOMC rate meetings in 2016, the next one on September 21st, and that's really what the market is looking at in terms of a catalyst for some more volatility. The market is currently pricing in 33% for a hike in September and 60% happening in December. And this is according to CME Group Fed Fund Futures. Let's take a look at one stock-specific story this morning. It was relatively quiet over the weekend in terms of news. Shares of Mylan were trading higher as it will launch a generic EpiPen at a 50% discount to the branded product's list price. The company reduced the out-of-pocket cost of EpiPen for some patients last week amid a wave of criticism from lawmakers and the public over the rapid escalation in the product's price in the past few years. Mylan is the latest company to be caught up in the growing outrage at drug price increases. Valeant went through this earlier in the year as well. So this is a story we're going to continue to follow. And we can see the volatility as we look at the 1-week chart of Mylan. You can see how it sold off, and we have a little bit of an uptick this morning. From the NASDAQ market site, Times Square, I'm Jill Malandrino for Channels TV.
And when we come back after the break, we'll look at the Zimbabwean economy. To stay with us.